Hello everybody, this is John Mark Johnson Jr. again, host of Reformed GGA, and today I'm here to do the next video in the series on multi-role guns, in particular multi-role rifles. In this series I've basically been walking through how I got to this particular gun and all the doodads and whatnot that I wound up adding onto it, which we'll talk about in later videos. And just to recap a little bit, first I set out my requirements for the gun, what I wanted it to do. I said it needs to be plinkable for a wide variety of people in 2020. It needs to be something that can work for bedside self-defense applications. It needs to work as a hunting rifle for medium to large game within 200 yards. Not that that is something that I really look forward to or I really enjoy, but if things get real bad, might be looking at providing food for myself, and so hey, having something that's at least capable is nice. So something that can be used as a hunting rifle is good. And then last but not least, it's 2020, and so something that can work in a mob. If you need to get out of a mob and perhaps protect yourself from a mob, something that is going to be powerful enough that you won't be spending too many shots on each individual assailant, and something that will be able to handle a fairly large number of assailants is a fairly important thing. So that was what I did in the first video, just talked about the roles that I wanted to fulfill, and I also specified things that I don't need it to do. For example, I don't need it to be a concealed carry gun because I already have concealed carry guns, so that kind of frees me up in a certain extent. I don't have to make it super small and compact or anything, so that is something I don't need it to do because I have other guns for that. And then another thing that I don't need it to do is be a competition gun. I'm not a competitor, and while something that's fast and efficient is nice, in most situations you don't need super fast and efficient. You know, you're not a competitor, you're not looking for, you know, that 100th of a second split time to beat out the next guy. I don't need to beat other competitors necessarily, I just need to be able to, say, kill the deer or go out plinking, or in the case of a home defense situation, you know, be able to adequately defend myself. I don't need something super fast and efficient. So first video I laid out what I wanted it to do and also was specific about some things that I don't really need it to do. After that we talked about caliber. Okay, so we know what this gun needs to do. Let's figure out the caliber that's going to work for this best, because the caliber is usually actually the most expensive part of the gun, at least for people who shoot on a fairly regular basis, and that was one of the things I wanted to do with it. Had to be plinkable in 2020. So if I go out and shoot fairly often, I need a relatively low cost round. But like I said, I want to be able to hunt with it, I want to be able to use this thing in a mob if I have to, without, you know, spending two terribly many rounds on a single assailant so that I have enough for maybe the next assailant or the next 5 or the next 10 or the next 30. I want my rounds to count. And so what I wound up coming to was the 7.62 by 39 cartridge. And the basic reasons is that it's relatively inexpensive, and it is also relatively effective even at longer ranges. Like I said, I want to be able to hunt out to 200 yards, and while 7.62 by 39 is certainly not a great long range cartridge, it will work out to 200 yards for sure. That is definitely within its available range, and they do make these soft point rounds for it, and so it works just fine. As a cartridge to fulfill all those parameters, it does everything that it needs to do. And so after that, we need to actually pick a gun. So we've determined what it needs to do. We have the caliber that is going to best fulfill that role. Now we need something to actually make use of that round. We need the gun itself. I'm not talking about adding the doodads and all that, but which base gun out of all the guns that are out there on the market do you pick? Well, that wound up being probably the biggest influencer as to why I wound up with the particular gun that I did. This is a Palmetto State Armory AK-47 GF3. It's been in other videos, of course. And the main reason why I wound up with it is because in 2020, availability of guns in general isn't all that great. There are a lot of distributors, especially at the time when I bought this, that were sold out of most of their inventory. And when you specify, okay, this is the round I want to use because it's relatively inexpensive but still fairly powerful and will fulfilled all the major roles that I want it to fulfill, well, then there's really becomes a very small, kind of tight circle of things that'll work for you. I mean, in the past, we had all kinds of 7.62 by 39 guns that were out there. You go far enough back, and you get when we were still importing the Chinese SKSs. They're a 7.62 by 39 gun, and those were usually relatively inexpensive. They usually didn't have box magazines. It was usually stripper-fed magazines, and so those are a little awkward to reload and things like that, but still not terrible. They're at least viable, relatively inexpensive, have a little bit longer barrel on them, so you usually get a little bit better ballistics. In times past, those would have been a viable option, but nowadays, you know, there's been import bans against the Chinese SKSs, and so they're not really available, fairly expensive, and of course it's 2020, so everything's bought up, so those aren't really an option. Another thing that is out there are the kind of AR style guns that fire 7.62 by 39. For example, Palmetto, same company that makes this, makes kind of an ARS gun that fires 7.62 by 39. I believe they call it the KS-47 or something like that. Another one that is out there is called the Mutant, and there's availability issues with those guns, but also the AR type guns usually are a little bit more expensive than this. And I'm on a budget, it's 2020, most of my budget is going to buying ammo, not guns, and so it's one of those things, where do I want to put the money? Do I want to put a bunch of money in the gun and not have a whole lot left over for ammo, or do I want to have a decent amount of ammo and maybe not as fantastic of a gun? Well, I decided to go with the option of having lots of ammo. Like I said, one of the requirements that I had for this gun is it has to be plinkable in 2020. I want to plink with it. I want to go out and shoot with it. I want to go out and shoot with it on a fairly regular basis. You know, at least once a week if I can. I'll settle for every other week, but at least once a week if I can would be really awesome. And so I want a lot of ammo. So I'm willing to step down in the quality of firearm and the things that the firearm can offer, as long as it's not inadequate and it gives me a suitable trade-off. It allows me to buy, you know, a few hundred, maybe even 1,000 more rounds, depending on what you're comparing it to and exactly when you bought your ammo. Because as the years gone on, it keeps getting more and more and more and more expensive. Alright, so that basically limited me to what Palmetto State Armory was producing, because they were one of the few companies that was still producing guns and all this. Not a great volume, but still producing them. I could still get them. So it was available still. It was at a price point where I could still afford to go out and get a decent amount of ammo. That has worked out well. And the overall quality of these guns, there's been lots of people that have reviewed it, including myself now. And the quality of these guns is such that they do seem to work. Now, I have found with this particular gun that I have to do some extra work to keep it running, because the quality of metal that was used on the bolt carrier and the front trunnion does not seem to be all that great, and so it requires a little bit of file work here and there. But I can keep it running, and keep it running pretty reliably, as long as I do some regular maintenance and some regular inspection, and I make sure I don't do anything stupid like messing with the headspace or messing with the bolt engagement, contact surface area and stuff like that. As long as I'm smart about it, I can keep it running effectively and efficiently, and have not had any significant issues with it for quite a while because of that. So it's reliable enough, right price points, and in terms of meeting the needs, it actually does meet all the needs. This one, like I said, is the Palmetto State Armory AK-47 GF3, and this particular version right here is what they call their Mokov variant, and it's just because of the furniture that it has on it. It has the MOE forend on it, and it also has the Zukov stock on it, and those features are actually something that really appeal to me for my needs. Like I said, one of the roles that I wanted this to fulfill was a plinker for a wide variety of people. Plinkable in 2020 for a wide variety of people, so people that are small in stature and larger in stature. And this Zukov stock, because it has an adjustable length of pole, helps fulfill that role. I can give it to someone who's fairly short, scoot in the stock, and it'll work for them, pull it out, work for a taller person, just fine. So as a plinking gun for other people to use, it works pretty good that way. That feature right there really appealed to me as opposed to some of the other AKs that were out there that may have had a fixed length of pull. If you're going to have a variety of different shooters shoot it, having something that's adjustable is nice. Also, the forend, as you can see, because it has basically M-LOK slots on it, it's more or less M-LOK compatible, or at least MOE compatible. I can put extra sections of rail and whatnot on there, and the gun comes with it, and so I don't have to worry about trading it out and getting something else on there. So I can put attachments on there. Another cool thing that PSA did is they actually have a rail on the side for optics mounting, this rail right here. So it is capable of accepting an optics mount and those kinds of things. So as far as this particular version was concerned, had a lot of the bonus features, you could say, that really kicked it up a notch and made it better for my roles. If I put an optic on it, it becomes better for hunting type applications and things like that. At least for me with my eyes, or some people it wouldn't matter at all, but for me with my eyes, I do better with optics, and typically most people do. Rather not miss the deer, and rather not hit it in a bad spot. You know, if you have to hunt to survive, you know, you want to get the game quickly and efficiently, and, you know, humanely. So more accuracy is better, so something that's optics capable is a good idea. Something where you can put these little extra bits of pick rail is nice if you want to attach things like lights and whatnot. If you're going to use it as a home defense gun, which was one of my roles, that's a useful thing. Also, I said mob defense, if you happen to be defending yourself against a mob at night, which is usually when mobs are the most unruly, having a light on there is not a bad idea. So it had some of the extra features, it was available, it was in the right price point, and generally serves all the roles that I want it to. It fires a relatively cheap round, so it's blinkable, like I said. It has an adjustable length of pole, so it'll accommodate different size shooters. I can add extra gizmos and gadgets to it that make it better for the hunting role, that make it better for the self-defense roles, either bedside or mob defense type roles. And another thing that is nice about it is that it is technically an AKM pattern gun, and not a historical AK-47. The early versions of the AK-47 tended to be fairly heavy, like around 10-ish pounds. Not super light guns, not super fun to have to carry around and all that. But this one, the base gun, is about 7 pounds, and that is because not too terribly long after the AK-47 was introduced, they looked back on it and said, wow, this thing is heavy to have to pack around all the time, and we don't want to do that. So let's lighten it up a little bit. And so they wound up shaving a couple of pounds off of it, and that's where the AKM was born. It's the AK modernized, basically. And this gun was basically patterned after that, so it comes in at about 7 pounds in its base configuration, and pretty much good to go. Like I said, I already had a lot of the features that made it something that I could build on later, and of course this was going to be a project going on throughout the year. There's lots of people who are in that same boat. You can't afford to get everything at once, so you get the component that you can at the time, and then you just, you know, save up and kind of keep adding to it as you go along, and that's what I did, and it worked great for that. You know, has functional, not great, but I would not say great, but at least functional sights on it already. I can, you know, afford to get another optic or light or sighting system on it later if I need to. That's just fine. Lots of great features that it already had. Now there are a couple of improvements that I made. One of them is to the safety selector. As you can see, I got a different safety selector that has a little shelf on it so that I can easily manipulate it with my index finger. It just makes the gun a little bit more ergonomic and a little less cumbersome for me. Another thing that I changed on it was the front ends. I changed out the little sugar scoop brake that these come with, and then instead of put this brake that is on there, this one I just got from the AK Operator Union store. They call it the fighter brake. I'm not actually sure entirely who makes it, but the reason why I did that is because the sugar scoop brakes, frankly, kind of overdo it, and they wind up dipping the gun down, and with the Zukaz stock, if the front dips down too much, the stock comes up and hits you in the cheek, and it's really unpleasant. This brake, though, is much more mild. It's much more appropriate to a semi-auto type firing sequence, and just works out a whole lot better in that regard, and so it actually shoots fairly flat now, and I don't have to worry about it dipping down on me and then the stock coming up and hitting me in the cheek. It actually shoots fairly straight. I mean, there's a pushback, but it's not bad at all. Very good, very good break, very good muzzle rise compensator. It doesn't overcompensate, and that's what I liked about it. But other than that, this is basically stock, and as I went through, I wound up putting some extra doodads on it. I put some pick rail here so I could put it on a light. We'll talk about that in a different video. And I did wind up making use of the side rail mount that PSA includes so that I could put an optic on it, things like that. But those will all be discussed in later videos. Right now, I just wanted to talk about the reality of compromise, like I talked about in other videos. If I had it all to do over again and I could pick any gun that I wanted with any budget, would I do this again? Honestly, probably not. I probably would have gone with maybe an import AK, or maybe one of the AR variant guns that fire 7.62x39, because they tend to be a little bit more accurate, and a lot of the import AKs, especially frankly the more expensive ones, tend to be higher quality and don't require nearly as much maintenance and upkeep and, you know, trying to get ahead of problems that this one does. But it's 2020. Those other options were either too expensive or just flat out not available. So this is what I wound up with. This is, for the situation, I think a really solid pick. It's not bad at all. I'm not trying to imply otherwise. I think there are other better options that have existed, at least in the past, but for the situation I was dealing with and when I bought it, it will definitely get the job done. And so, like I said, it's the reality of compromise. Is it the best in every single regard? No, but it is a platform that is capable enough and is able to hit all of the marks that I need it to hit. Is it applicable in 2020 for a wide variety of people? Yes. Fires a relatively cheap cartridge, has an adjustable length of pull. It's not overly heavy so that people can actually still hold it, shoulder it, and get relatively good shots off. Made a couple of ergonomic improvements to help with that, making sure that it's not overcompensated and things like that. So fits the first roll just fine. The second roll, does this actually work as something that will work for, say, bedside self-defense? Yeah, it does. Has a very capable cartridge. It holds a lot of them. I mean, these things usually come with 30-round magazines. That's considered fairly standard for an AK. Definitely enough power to get the job done there. A little bit different, you know, manual of arms, different ergonomics, but it's all workable. Like I said, making some ergonomic improvements really takes it into a place where it really is self-defense viable. As far as hunting is concerned, it's definitely not the quintessential hunting rifle, but like I said, I'm only expecting to get out to 200 yards with this thing, and it is definitely capable of that. In the hands of people that are more skilled than I, they could easily get out to 500 yards, but that's not me. But certainly within my intended range, within 200 yards, yeah, perfectly adequate for that role. And then mob defense, if I ever am unlucky enough to wind up in that situation and I can't avoid it and I can't get out ahead of time, well, 7.62x39 is a fairly powerful cartridge. I'm not going to have to spend too many rounds on each assailant, hopefully. Has fairly high capacity magazines. You could do a whole lot worse. So that is how I wound up with this particular platform. Is it necessarily the best one out there? No, it's not. Is it even the best AK that's out there? No, it's not. Objectively, it's not. Good AKs have higher quality bolt carriers and front trunnions that you don't have to file on periodically in order to keep them running. That's not an issue. Okay, this is definitely not the highest quality AK that is out there. It's not bad. It certainly works, and with a little bit of TLC, you can keep it running quite well. But it's not optimal. But I got it under conditions that were less than ideal, and because of that, you're going to have to make compromises. And as long as you have in mind what you need it to do, and it will fulfill those roles with enough reliability and enough longevity, you're good to go. And this is something I really want to get across to people in 2020. A lot of those, this would be ideal, this would be great, those kinds of things, this is not the year to be worrying about that. Okay, if it fulfills the basic roles that you need it to, and it has sufficient quality to be sustainable, it's not going to break, you know, the first time you take it out, then that's going to be good enough for you. And you should really consider getting it if it's available. All right, thank you all very much for your time and attention. For those of you who are in Christ, go with God and be blessed. For those of you who are not, I pray that you would come to know the true Christ of history, the only genuine Savior of mankind. Amen.